Have you ever noticed some people never seem to look the same twice? One month they have long hair, the next it's shaved. They go from blonde to brunette to pink. Their style shifts from minimalist to maximalist, corporate to bohemian. They get piercings, then let them close. Tattoos accumulate like chapters in a book no one else can read. And if you ask them why, they'll say something casual. Oh, I was bored. I just wanted to change. But if you look into their eyes, you'll see something that doesn't quite match the lightness in their voice. You'll see something searching, unsettled, something that suggests this isn't really about hair color or clothing at all. Because the person who constantly changes their appearance isn't just experimenting with style. They're trying to solve a problem that has nothing to do with how they look. So what are they really searching for? Let's start with what everyone sees. You change your appearance constantly. Every few weeks, sometimes every few days, there's something new. A different haircut, a new wardrobe, different makeup. You're perpetually mid-transformation, and people have opinions. Some think it's creative and bold. Others find it exhausting and unstable. But neither group understands what's really happening. Because here's the truth. You're not changing your appearance because you love change. You're changing it because staying the same feels like suffocation. Every time you look in the mirror and see the same person you saw yesterday, something inside you recoils. It feels static. Like you're being forced to wear a costume of someone you're not quite sure you are, so you change it. You cut your hair, you dye it, you pierce something. And for a moment you feel alive, you feel like you're moving forward. But then the feeling fades. You're looking in the mirror again at this new version of yourself and it already feels outdated. Wrong. So you change it again. Psychologically, this pattern isn't about appearance. It's about identity or the lack of a stable one. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson described identity formation as a critical task of growing up. It's the process of figuring out who you are, what you believe, and what you value, developing a coherent sense of self. But for some people, that coherence never quite solidifies. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, a state where you have unformed a clear sense of who you are. And when your internal identity is unstable, your external appearance becomes a laboratory. A place to experiment with different versions of yourself, hoping that one of them will finally feel true. In a strange way, the experimentation itself becomes your identity. You become the person who's always changing. At least you're consistent in your inconsistency. But the truth is, you're exhausted. When you constantly change your appearance, you're not just expressing yourself, you're trying to find yourself. You're searching for an external form that matches an internal truth you can't quite articulate. It's like trying on different masks, hoping one will transform into your real face. This isn't vanity. It's often the opposite. People who do this are usually deeply introspective. They question who they are more than most. They're aware that the self is a construction, and if it's constructed, maybe it can be reconstructed. Maybe the next version will be the right one. But the problem is, you're looking for the answer in the wrong place. Because the discomfort you feel isn't about your hair or your clothes. It's about something deeper that no amount of external change can fix. Neuroscience shows our sense of self is maintained by specific neural networks. These regions integrate memories, values, and experiences into a coherent narrative. This is who I am. But when there's trauma, instability, or invalidation during critical developmental periods, this process can be disrupted. Instead of a coherent narrative, you end up with fragments. And when your internal sense of self is fragmented, your external appearance becomes a way to impose order. But here's the paradox. Every time you change your appearance, you're reinforcing the fragmentation. You're telling yourself, I'm not fixed yet. This isn't the real me, and so the real you remains elusive. Always one transformation away. When was the last time you felt truly comfortable in your own skin? Not excited about a new look, but actually at ease. If you're struggling to remember, that's telling. Because here's what people don't see. They don't see you standing in front of the mirror at 2 a.m., scissors in hand, unable to stop yourself because the urge to change anything is overwhelming. They don't see the boxes of clothes you've bought and donated in an endless cycle. They don't see you scrolling through old photos, trying to figure out which version of you was real and finding that none of them feel quite right. They don't see the exhaustion of constantly performing, or the loneliness of people saying, you look so different. When all you hear is, I don't know who you are anymore, and maybe you don't either. Attachment theory offers another lens. If you grew up with inconsistent mirroring, if the people around you reflected back different versions of you depending on their mood, you never developed a stable sense of self. Children see themselves in their caregiver's eyes. When a parent consistently acknowledges your authentic self, you internalize that image. But if that reflection kept changing, you learn that identity is conditional, performative, something you adjust based on what's required. So now, as an adult, you keep adjusting. You keep trying to find the version of yourself that will finally earn consistent acceptance. You're trying to earn from others what you should have received unconditionally. And no haircut, no aesthetic can substitute for that. This is where it gets painful. You're desperate to be seen, but terrified of being truly known. Every time you change, you reset the clock, people notice, they react, you feel visible. But they're not seeing you. They're seeing the change. The real you, the messy, uncertain person underneath remains hidden, safe from judgment. Maybe you changed because as long as you're in transition, you don't have to commit. You don't have to risk being fully seen and found lacking. Because if you finally settled on one look and people still didn't get you, that would be devastating. At least this way, you can tell yourself, maybe the next version will be the one that works. Over time, you start to lose touch with what you actually like. You look at old photos and barely recognize yourself emotionally. It's like you've left a trail of discarded identities behind you. Psychologists call this depersonalization, a disconnection from your own sense of self. You feel like an observer in your own life. And the changes keep coming because standing still means confronting the emptiness underneath. It means facing the question, if I'm not constantly becoming someone new, who am I right now? And that question is terrifying because what if the answer is, I don't know? But this is important. This isn't a flaw. This is what happens when you're trying to build a self without a stable foundation. Maybe you grew up in chaos. Maybe you were molded to fit others' expectations. Maybe trauma fractured your sense of continuity. Or maybe you're just deeply sensitive to the truth that identity is a construct, that we're all constantly changing. And while most people suppress that, you can't ignore it. You feel the impermanence of everything, including yourself. So you lean into it, you make art out of it, but eventually you realize I can keep changing forever, and I'll still be the same person underneath, still searching, still unsettled. So what do? Healing doesn't mean never changing again. It means changing with intention instead of compulsion. It means asking yourself, am I making this change because I want to or because I'm escaping something? Start to notice the urge when it arises. Sit with it. Get curious. What are you feeling? What are you avoiding? What would it mean to stay as you are for one more week? And here's the radical part. Start to build an identity that is unbased on how you look. What do you value? What do you believe? What makes you come alive? These are the questions that form a stable identity. Not what color should my hair be, but what do I stand for? You are not your hair. You are not your clothes. You are the consciousness experiencing all of this. The awareness that's been present through every transformation. That's the real you. It's been there all along. Underneath the pink hair and the shaved head. Underneath the punk phase and the minimalist phase. There's a continuous thread, a self that's been watching, searching. And that self doesn't need to be constructed or performed. It just needs to be acknowledged. Maybe that's the real transformation you've been seeking. Not a change in appearance, but a change in perspective. A shift from, I need to become the right version of myself to, I already am myself and that's enough. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying so hard to define yourself through external changes, you start to discover who you actually are. When you create stillness, your authentic self has room to emerge. Not the self you think you should be, just you. What would it feel like to wake up tomorrow and not need to change anything? Not because you've found the perfect look, but because you've made peace with imperfection. Because you've accepted that you're a work in progress. What would it feel like to let yourself be seen, really seen, without the buffer of constant transformation? It's vulnerable, I know. It means risking that people might not get you. But that risk exists anyway. You can change 1,000 times, and some people still won't see you. And some will see you regardless of what you look like because they're looking deeper. And those are the people who matter. The psychology of constantly changing your appearance isn't about appearance at all. It's about a soul searching for a home. A person trying to create externally what they can't find internally. A sense of solidity, of being real. And you are real. You've always been real. You don't need to choose a final form. But you also don't need to keep running from yourself. Peace comes from acceptance. From looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back, not because they look a certain way, but because you finally stopped demanding they be someone else. You are not your hairstyle or your clothing. You are the person who's been carrying all of this. The seeker. The experimenter. The one brave enough to keep trying. Maybe it's time to be as kind to that person as you've been creative with their appearance. Maybe it's time to let them rest. To let them simply exist. Because you were always enough. Even before the first change, even right now exactly as you are. The real you doesn't need to be created. It just needs to be allowed. Thank you for watching.